Hello, ako si JC Punong Bayan, resident economist ng Rappler, and welcome to Newsbreak Chats. Ngayong linggo ay nagsimula ang isang malawakang tigil pasada ng mga jeepney bilang protesta ng jeepney drivers at operator sa planong jeepney modernization ng gobyerno. Nakaamba kasing ma-phase out ang mga lumang jeepney at mawalan ng trabaho ang libo-libong jeepney drivers kapag hindi sila makapag-consolidate o makabuo ng kooperatiba ngayong taon. Ayon sa maraming jeepney drivers, hindi naman daw sila tutol sa planong modernization. Pero dapat daw sana ay magkaroon daw ng tinatawag na just transition patungo rito. Pero paano nga ba tayo umabot sa puntong ito? Ano ang ibig sabihin ng just transition? At ano ang silbi ng consolidation ng jeepney drivers? Ano ang balak ipalit ng gobyerno sa mga lumang jeepney? At naging epektibo nga ba ang tigil pasada ng jeepney drivers at operators ngayong linggo? Ngayong hapon, makakasama natin sa kwentuhan tungkol sa mga isyong ito si Lance Spencer Yu, Rappler reporter na nag-cover sa jeepney transport strike. Welcome, Lance, sa Newsbreak Chats.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So, kamusta naman, Lance, dun sa, alam natin na actually ito yung first live reports mo for Rappler at challenge ito, malawakang nationwide jeepney transport strike. Pero kamusta naman yung pag-cover mo sa naging strike nila?
Yeah, actually yun nga eh. So first live ever. Of course, you know, the nerves and all that. And then yung mismong strike pa, it starts at 7 a.m. So syempre, you want to be there in advance. So that means yung pull out namin sa office was 5 a.m. So of course, you can imagine, everyone's a bit sleep deprived pa, no? But of course, you know, what can you do? You have to be there. You have to be there when it happens. And so that's what we did. Then yung pinuntahan namin is it's just one of many different events. So you have some in, I think the main one was in Kalayaan. And then you have some in Alabang, you have some, it's all over Metro Manila. The one that we went to, it's a jeepney caravan. So yun yung parang pinaka message nila. They want to drive that caravan from UP from UP to LTFRB's office, and then from there it goes to Mendiola. So that's right up to the palace, right? So yun yung pinaka-message nila.
Doon sa mga nakausap mo, no, nakita ko yung reports mo at marami kang nakausap na jeepney drivers and operators and even yung mga pasahero. So, madali bang makausap sila? Meron ba silang marami silang opinions about the issue, pero anong challenges when talking to the people that you talk to?
Yeah, actually, yun nga, surprisingly, they are very, parang eager to talk about it. You can really feel na they feel, I don't know, they don't feel listened to. So when you give them a mic, when you give them the spotlight, they really take it. They really want to air out yung mga concerns nila, whether it's about yung jeepney modernization or yung first step, which is consolidation. So ayun, they were very eager naman to talk about it. No problems with that.
Okay. Actually, interesado ako, Lance, dun sa gaano ka-effective yung naging mga protesta. Kasi maraming mga figures na lumulutang. Pero meron ba tayong solid na idea kung ilan ba talaga yung mga nakapag-participate ng mga jeepney drivers and operators nationwide? And paano nag-drive ba yung mga numbers coming from government and from the ranks of the jeepney operators and drivers?
Yeah, so yun nga. That's one of the things with these type of protests. Of course, you have numbers coming from the government, numbers coming from the protesting groups. And of course, the protesting groups, of course, they want their numbers to make it look like it's effective, right? So you can expect there's some numbers being inflated there. With the government, you have them wanting to downplay. So obviously, it's going to be different. So just to give some numbers, no? Si Manibela chairman, so he's the one who, I guess you can say, led the protests. Sabi niya originally, 40,000 PUVs, so that's both jeeps and UV Express, will be joining. Then on the day itself, Manibela also said mga 80% ng routes in Metro Manila were affected. And then Piston naman, they said 85 to 100%. So it's very extreme if you take it from their numbers. But when we talk to LTFRB, yung sabi naman nila, 5% of routes nationwide lang yung na-affect. When you look at NCR, that's just 10% now. So very different from both perspectives. Most likely it's inflated. So the truth is probably somewhere in between those.
So i-average lang natin yung, yung numbers coming out.
Maybe.
Pero actually, nakita ko rin, Lance, na parang at the same time na nagkaroon ng jeepney transport strikes, ay parang kumonti din yung commuters in the roads. Parang may mga nagsasabi na parang mistulan siyang holiday. Saan nagagaling yun? Bakit kaya ganun yung naging parang turnout ng mga tao? Both, yung mga pasahero na supposedly ay parang to bring out yung mga issues ay dapat mapaparalyze yung transportation pero parang wala din mga tao masyado na nasa kalsada.
Actually, that's true. Nung pumunta kaming sa may Commonwealth, yeah, walang tao, as in no one. And that was morning rush hour, no? Ang konti lang ng tao. And when we talked to the jeepney, yung mga, not the traditional jeepneys, but the modern jeepneys that were driving by, sabi nga nila, they were joking around, holiday ba ngayon? Kasi yan nga, parang walang tao, di ba? And then, the reason why we think it happened that way is because when you look at yung mga schools, right, a lot of them announced that they're shifting for this week, they're shifting to online classes. Same thing with work. A lot of workplaces, they shifted to online. So that's probably one of the reasons why there weren't many stranded passengers. But I guess it would be a different case kung, normal workflow, normal everything, and then nag-strike yung mga jeeps. Maybe that's when you would have seen the stranded passengers building up. Yun siguro.
I guess yun yung isa sa drawbacks kapag na-introduce na or sanay na tayo doon sa online setup na parang pwede tayong maging flexible kung may ganong klaseng disruptions. Pero Lance, hindi ito yung unang jeepney transport strike nationwide. Back in 2017, in response to the planned phase-out, ay marami na ring mga transport strikes na nangyari. And then in 2019 as well. Pero this time around, ano ba yung mga issues na pinaparating sana ng jeepney drivers and operators that they haven't aired out before? Or do they think na parang na-disappoint ba sila dun sa parang, kasi they thought na with the new administration ay parang masascrap na yung idea of jeepney phase-out or modernization and then we have this plan. So ano yung mga hinaing na sa tingin mo ay bago ngayon or hindi na-raised before?
Yes, actually yun nga yun. When, di ba yung mismong plan ng jeepney modernization or yung wider PUV modernization, that was conceptualized and put into department order during the time of Duterte, so that's 2017. During the campaign naman of BBM, when he was talking to transport groups, he was making a lot of promises that even if they were to pursue itong modernization nga, it'll come with a lot of subsidies, a lot of help extended to these jeepney drivers and their families. And then, when we spoke to the jeepney drivers there on the ground, sabi nga nila, it's as if BBM went back on his promise. That's what they felt, that BBM didn't fulfill a lot of the things that he said. And here we are again, looking at possible jeepney phase out. So yun yung pinaka, I guess, grievance nila. Parang they were made to believe again that, they'll be okay, they'll be not phased out, and now their livelihoods are in danger again. So yun yung pinaka, issue. But if you were to break that issue down, they point to two main reasons. So they have yung mandatory consolidation, which is the one that we're seeing right now, yung may deadline na December 31, so they moved that, yeah. And then the second one is the fleet modernization. So yun yung they have to upgrade their fleets into the very expensive jeepneys, the modern.
Pero alam din natin, Lance, na parang this is part and parcel of a broader PUV modernization program or plan, di ba? So eventually, for example, even yung mga UV Express, maapektuhan din sila at some point. Pero do we see na parang they're also planning similar events or parang is there any room na parang magproprotesta din sila in the future? Ano yung take mo on this?
Actually, yeah, you're right. It's not just yung mga jeepneys. They get the most media coverage, they get the most attention. But yeah, it also extends pati yung sa UV Express nga. But UV Express, they're also organized into an organization. So they have I forgot the exact name, pero that specific organization, they released a statement. And I think it was, I'm not sure if it's going to be flashed there on the screen, but if you read there, it says there, it's a press statement from that organization, the UV Express National Alliance of the Philippines. So they said here that we strongly deny and oppose the declaration of Mr. Mar Valbuena, yung chairman of Manibela, to call for that nationwide strike. So they didn't join, in short. They were very much opposed to it kasi nga they don't first of all, they don't disagree naman with yung modernization program, and they also don't want to do a strike that will, in their words, paralyze and affect the growing economy of the country. So for them, yeah, they're not participating in that strike.
So parang what we're seeing right now is there's a difference of opinion among PUV drivers and operators themselves. Pero Lance, supposedly you're going to cover this nationwide strike for a week, ano?
Yes.
Pero alam natin it was cut short. Siguro blessing in disguise for you. Pero kasi instead of 5 days, naging 2 days lang effectively, and then last night, alam natin na yung Piston and Manibela, they were able to talk to some officials sa office of the executive secretary, and then they called off any further protests this week. So anong nangyari doon, Lance? Ano yung mga napag-usapan? Do we have an idea of the things that they talked about? And I mean, bakit biglang parang nag-fizzle out na itong kanilang jeepney strike?
Yeah, so actually, this happened in the evening, nung Tuesday nga. So it's a dialogue between Manibela, Piston, and some palace officials. And then I think mga 11:30 na ng gabi yung statement from the palace about these transport groups not pursuing na nga yung transport strike nila. And just to clarify, no, even if it's palace officials, BBM wasn't there. So it's just, if I recall correctly, yung press secretary and some other palace officials that met with Manibela and other groups. Now, what they discussed, it's not exactly clear, no specifics yet on what they agreed to, or what exactly yung parang revisions to yung omnibus franchising guidelines. But so far, what they're saying in the press release is that the president ordered LTFRB and DOTR to review the omnibus franchising guidelines. So the omnibus franchising guidelines, that's the one that governs how the PUV modernization program will look like. So that's, because of that statement, these transport groups felt na, okay, we can take a step back, we can wait until they revise it, and then from that point, they can see if, yung demands ba nila, yung concerns ba nila were addressed properly.
Pero do you think there something will really come out of it, something solid? Kasi parang what we've seen in the past years, this is nothing new, and yung mga jeepney drivers and operators have been protesting since 2017 or thereabouts, and then after that, can you walk us through the timeline of events? Saan ba nagsimula itong idea for jeepney phase out or jeepney modernization? And I mean, in the grand timeline, so parang are we progressing or are we just really delaying the inevitable? Kasi parang nakita natin na merong deadline, and then the government will walk back on that deadline and then extend it further. Parang extend lang siya ng extend, pero wala talagang napagkakayarian. Yeah. So ano sa tingin mo yung nangyayari dito sa timeline na ito?
Yeah, so actually we have to put it into context first, no. Yung PUV modernization program, it's not just one thing, right? It has many different components. Sabi nga ng LTFRB, there's 10 different components to that. So what we're seeing here is yung first step pa lang, yung consolidation. After that, there's still fleet modernization, where you're buying yung mga brand new vehicles. So there's many steps to this, and we're just at the first. Yung sa consolidation naman, that's right, it's been put off many times. So during the Senate hearing with LTFRB, they presented that they've moved the deadline 6 times. So the original deadline, pinaka-original, March 16, 2019. Then it was moved to June 30, 2020. But then, of course, the pandemic happened. And so they moved it to March 31, 2021. Then they moved it again, March 31, 2022. Then it was moved again to 2023. And then yung supposedly final nila, yung final supposedly was June 30 this year. And then of course we saw yung nationwide protests. And that's why they moved it again to December 31 of this year. So yun yung parang timeline of how it happened.
Yun nga kasi parang nung nagkaroon ng pandemic, of course, this represented a huge setback dun sa industry. Nakita natin maraming mga jeepney drivers na namamalimos. I see this often pag dumadaan doon sa Katipunan area, doon sa likod ng UP, malapit actually sa School of Economics where I teach. Nandun sila, and for a long time nandun sila na namamalimos, and parang some people were saying na parang yun nga, it was supposed to be an opportunity to parang progress doon sa jeepney modernization. Pero with the pandemic almost over, parang yun nga, parang extend lang ng extend. Is there a sense na parang this is a loop, a never-ending loop na how do we get out of that loop, Lance?
Nga, the problem with, or at least according to yung mga drivers, no, the problem with this, why it keeps getting extended, is because they're not addressing yung pinaka root problems. So for them, it's just like you're just extending the deadline. Pero sa dulo, ganun pa rin naman eh. They'll be phased out according to them. So that's their worry. They don't receive yung pinaka financial support that they're asking for from the government. And that, I think, is what they're hoping will change this time. And to be honest, if you look at it, it's changing quite a bit. They already got a bump up to their subsidy, so that's one step that they've been asking for that was already granted.
Mabuti na banggit mo yung Lance, ano? Kasi actually ito yung meat of the issue, yung finances, on how are we going to fund yung replacement dito sa old jeepneys. Merong kataga na just transition na laging nagka-crop up on social media. Ano ba tong just transition na ina-advocate ng transport sector? Paki-explain nga, Lance, yung just transition.
Yeah, so just transition. Of course, when you're changing from one system to another, it's going to be difficult. Diba? And if you're, I suppose, living on the margins, like a lot of mga jeepney drivers, even jeepney operators, it's especially hard because imagine one traditional jeep, it just costs 150 to 250,000. And then you're going to ask them to buy a modern jeep that costs 2.5, 2.8 million. So how are they going to afford that, diba? So that's what they're asking for. They want further support. When you ask them naman if, are they against it in principle, modernizing? And of course they say no. Who wouldn't want, diba, a new Jeep with aircon, with Wi-Fi? That's what they say. But yun nga, yung problem is, how do they afford it? That's the biggest problem for them. And when you talk about just transition, you don't want to burden people who are already living on the margins with an even bigger problem, right? An even bigger problem for them to solve. They're basically imposing on them to get buried in millions of debt. So that's their biggest concern, the financial.
Yun nga yung problema, Lance. Kasi di ba, we're coming from the pandemic, from the point na namamali mo sila, and then ngayon pa lang sila nakaka-recover. Tapos parang a few years since the start of the pandemic, biglang you're asking them to take out loans in the millions of pesos. Pero ano ba talaga yung cost, Lance? Actually, I wanted to ask this talaga. Kasi there are conflicting estimates dun sa cost of a modern jeepney. Some say 1.3 million pesos. Some people say double that amount, so mga 2.6 million. Do we have a handle doon sa actual or talagang average cost of a modern jeepney?
Okay, so yeah, modern jeepney kasi there's no specific like unit, like this is the modern jeepney that everyone has to buy. Yung sabi ng LTFRB and DOTR, as long as you meet the Philippine national standards, which is set by the DTI naman, that can be used as the modern jeepney. So you have many different models. Yung the highest price ceiling so far is parang 2.8 million. These higher end ones, yung mga 2.8, 2.5, these are the ones that are imported. So they have compliant engines, mga Euro 4, Euro 5, Euro 6. They can have aircon, they can have Wi-Fi. Minsan may camera pa nga inside, so like security cameras. Then you go down to the different classes of jeepneys. You have yung modern Jeep that they showed actually when we went to the LTFRB. Parang it looks very much like a traditional jeepney. But it's compliant to the requirements. That one naman, the body of that is made here in the Philippines. So parang, if I recall correctly, it's made by Sarao, and that only costs around 1.3 million. So it really varies a lot. And what they're focusing on right now is to bring down the costs to make it more affordable. Hopefully by tapping local industry, yun nga, to Sarao, mga ganon, to bring down the costs.
If you think of it, parang opportunity nga siya to boost domestic manufacturing industry, similar to what we had several decades ago, kung saan talagang there was a robust vehicle parang manufacturing industry here in the Philippines, and then yung jeepneys nga. Pero can you describe to us, Lance, nakasakay ka dun sa modern jeepney, how does it feel? Does it feel different, or parang ano yung mga innovations that goes into a modern jeepney that we don't have in the usual jeepneys?
Yes. So actually, the one that they had displayed there, no, it looks very much like the traditional jeepney. Yung sa labas niya, it has the paintings, ganon.
Mm,
But yung openings or yung entry exit points,
mm,
you have one at the side. So kunyari, this is the jeepney, right? You have one at the side, you have one at the back, and then yung sa likod, parang it has a accessibility ramp. So
mm,
kunyari, may a person with disabilities who maybe with a wheelchair like that, who will ride. So you can set down the ramp and then so that's these sort of things make it more accessible too. And then the ceiling is also higher. It's
mm,
also wider. So
Hindi ka yuyuko.
yes,
Pwede kang tumayo sa loob ng
tama,
modern
tama.
jeepney. I see. So it's actually quite good, ano? I mean, it parang is a refreshing take on the jeepney. Pero going back to the issue of finances, I remember that years back, the land bank or maybe some other government financial institution was actually offering up loans for jeepney drivers and operators. And then of course, there's the proffered subsidy of government. Pero gaano kalaki ba yung subsidy na in-offer, Lance, ng gobyerno para sa isang modern jeepney? Ilang percent siya, or mga rough estimate lang, will it cover yung cost of a modern jeepney or not at all, sobrang liit niya? Give us a sense of the subsidy that the government is offering.
Okay, so this is a big topic now for the jeepney drivers and operators. So even if you go with the cheapest one they have so far, yung 1.3 million, that's still 1.3 billion, right? Yung subsidy ng government, it's they bumped it up from 160 to 260, plus the however much is the worth of your traditional jeep that you're giving in. So even with that though, it's very far from the 1.3 million, right? So yung only option mo talaga is to pull out a loan from one of the state banks, yung either with DBP or Land Bank. And so that's the one that they're really concerned with, because a lot of them say, it's nice to have modern jeepneys, but is it really worth it if it comes at the expense of, being mired in, I don't know, what, millions and millions of debt? And then, kunyari, one person we talked to, he gave an estimate also of how much they would have to earn every day to cover the interest and to cover the principal. So right now, he drives along yung Pateros route, and he earns around 2,000 a day. That's gross. He estimates he needs around 3.5 to pay off a modern GP. So that's the rough estimate for that.
I see. It's funny that the government is roping in itong Land Bank and DBP. If you remember, recently in the news cycles, these are being tapped naman for the Maharlika Investment Fund, di ba? Getting 50 billion, 25 billion, and one thinks na what if doon na lang sa modernization ng jeepneys napunta yung perang yun, ano? But I digress. Going back to that, merong idea called consolidation. Tungkol saan ba ito, and how might it help doon sa pagbili ng or pag-finance ng mga bagong jeepney? Kasi the idea is parang supposedly it will pool funds among members of the cooperative or corporation, pero will it really help in defraying the cost of the modern jeepney?
Yes. So when you consolidate, it also actually comes with its own costs. So that's also a thing that you have to look out for. So when you consolidate, for example, I think I have the figures right here. It costs they parang may down payment pa kasi yan. And then when you have individuals joining that cooperative, they have to meet certain requirements. They have to pay certain documents. Ganon. They estimate it's around 20 to 30,000 per individual operator joining. So there's also their own costs. And then, yung mahirap dun sa cooperative, they said that when you join, you surrender your individual franchise. You also surrender the Jeep. Na it won't be placed in your name anymore. It'll be placed in the cooperative or yung corporation's name. So yun yung parang loss of control that they're afraid of. So for example, what if the cooperative or corporation is badly managed? Nalugi, diba? What will they do? So those are the problems that they're facing.
Di balance part din dito yung revamping of the way jeepney drivers earn. So from the current boundary system, So some people are saying na doon sa kooperatiba or corporation ay sasweldohan yung mga jeepney drivers instead. Ano yung feeling ng mga jeepney drivers tungkol dito? Are they okay with it or are they comfortable enough dun sa lumang boundary system?
A lot of them actually want the syempre yung mga benefits, right? Under this you have SSS, PhilHealth, Pag-ibig, but also yung fear nila is uh, they might just end up having to pay off yung utang nila, diba? So even if they earn, they still have so much debt, they still have to pay off yung principal plus yung interest. So that's the problem for them. They like the idea, they like yung salary, yung stability. You don't have to chase na yung boundary mo, diba? But yun nga, they're afraid that the expenses that come with modernizing is too big.
Mm. Is there a chance, Lance, na fully subsidize ito ng gobyerno? Kasi, I mean, some people say na bakit pa papautangin, bakit hindi na lang ilibre yung mga modern jeepneys? Do we have that fiscal space at all to finance this or, I mean, subsidize this totally?
Well, that's the big question, right? And well, right now the DOTR, there's a chance maybe that they might increase subsidies more. In fact, they've already started doing that. So it's really up to them how they'll be able to handle that. Yun nga, they're gonna increase the subsidy, but the question also is where will they get where will they get that amount? That's like a 100,000 peso increase in their subsidy already. If you're gonna increase that even more, where are you gonna pull that from in the budget? So
Yeah.
medyo mahirap nga eh.
Actually, ang laki nga ng deficit natin. Last year, about more than 1 trillion pesos na nga. And then this year, unless they find new revenue sources, for example, pero let's see kung
Let's see.
na-expand nila yung fiscal space. Pero Lance, some people say din na parang the jeepney is a cultural icon. So parang why replace it in the first place? When in fact, it's an integral part of the Filipino identity and Filipino culture. Kailangan ba talaga siyang i-phase out totally?
Oh, well, for that, yung reasoning naman ng DOTR, LTFRB is when you talk about environmental health, because of course, some of our older jeepneys, you can really see yung smoke nila, diba? It's very polluting, and of course, their engines are quite old, hindi sila Euro 4 compliant, and then you also have the aspect of commuter safety and commuter comfort. So that's another thing. Medyo mahirap nga, diba, to get on a jeepney, diba? So yun yung pinaka-reasons nila for why they have to upgrade, why they have to modernize.
Okay. Sige Lance, we're nearly done dito sa ating Newsbreak Chats. Moving forward, ano yung mga possible solutions dito sa PUV modernization and the resistance coming from the jeepney drivers and operators? Kasi going back to our previous idea na parang atras abante, tapos yung mga deadlines keep getting put off, parang it's an endless loop parang back and forth between government and the jeepney industry. So how do we move out of that and ano yung mga proposals that will allow us to get out of that loop?
Yeah, so I think the only way to really end the debate, the only way to help them move forward is if the government addresses their core problem, the one that they've been raising naman since before pa, yung the cost of upgrading, the cost of modernizing. And right now, the LTFRB, they said that consolidation, that idea of consolidating is the first step and it's non-negotiable. So for them, there's really no escaping that. They really have to consolidate. The question is, when it comes to fleet modernization, will the government be able to give them subsidies to help them deal with the finances, the financial costs? So that's another thing that Piston said that they will be monitoring. So Piston actually told us that once they expect that the omnibus franchising guidelines will be revised before December 31. And once that comes out, yun nga, they're gonna look further. Were their demands addressed? Did it meet what they were protesting? Otherwise, sabi nila, they could hold further strikes. So that's what we could expect. That's what we could see in the coming months.
I see. So hopefully yung financing problem really gets solved kasi ito yung talagang meat of the issue.
Yeah.
Kung pwede nga lang sana na ilibre na lahat, 'di ba? Para matapos na yung debates or yung contentious, pero I mean doon naman papasok yung economics of it na parang can the government actually afford such a huge subsidy for an entire industry rather than for example requiring people to take out loans or partial subsidies? So sige, I'm sure babantayan mo pa to, Lance. Hindi pa tapos itong issue na to, pero you got that breather dahil na cut short yung transport strike. Pero at any rate, abangan namin yung reports mo, Lance, on this issue. So I guess that's it for this Newsbreak chat. I'm JC Punong Bayan and hope to see you in the next episode. Thank you.